I'm Julie Legg, author of The Missing Piece and diagnosed with ADHD at 52. Welcome to ADH Difference. In this episode, I chat with Romy Gretchen from Therapy Advances. Romy is a dedicated advocate for ADHD and neurodivergent inclusion, drawing on her lived experiences as a multiple neurodivergent individual with ADHD, autism, dyslexia and dyspraxia to inform her work as a therapist, trainer and consultant. Late diagnosed, she understands both the challenges and strengths of neurodivergence and focuses on creating affirming, inclusive spaces for individuals and professionals. Romy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, welcome.
Look, you were first diagnosed with dyslexia in your 20s and later with ADHD and autism in your early 40s. There's a lot to pack in there. Can you share your personal journey with me?
Yeah, sure. So it started, I was working in a school and it was a music school. There were quite a lot of creative kids there and also staff. And my boss kept noticing that when I needed to read out phone numbers, that I would often say 38 as 83. And so she just kind of clocked it. And then it was like, have you ever thought about dyslexia? And I'm like, no. Like, I was at university at the time. No one's ever mentioned anything like that to me before. But it also just really hit right in the shame spot. Like the things that I got wrong, that I was covering up so heavily. And then I remember my third year at uni, there was a lecturer who just really openly said, oh, and if I say something wrong, it's just because I'm dyslexic. And I was just like, oh, you can just own it just like that. Okay. So I ended up going to student services and had an assessment with them. And they were like, yeah, you're dyslexic and you're probably also dyspraxic, but we can't test for that here. And all of a sudden things just kind of was like, oh, so I am clumsy, but it's not like, it wasn't willful and it wasn't just a case of you just need to try harder. And I remember just going through a process of needing to settle that and seeing things a little bit differently. Anyway, life kind of goes on. I met my then husband, and I remember the day I met him, I was like, oh, I think he's autistic. But we got on really well. We had 3 kids, and my youngest started displaying some autistic traits and certainly dyspraxia and also some ADHD traits. And my mum said, she is so much like you. And I was like, really? Okay, well, I can see the dyspraxia. And she was like, yeah, but she also does this, this, and this. And you did that all as a kid. And I was like, oh, okay. So then my second child ended up also getting a diagnosis. And I was like, oh, okay. Something's going on here. So I asked for an assessment. And in the UK, I think it took about 2 years to get an autism, and then I think then another year to get an ADHD assessment. And that's where we are.
Wow, absolutely. Now, you're a psychotherapist.
That's right.
And you work you're heavily involved with training therapists yourself, including a specialist diploma, and you're addressing neurotypical biases in therapy. So could you tell me more about some common neurotypical biases that you encounter in therapy?
Okay. So if we start right from the beginning, most therapy books were written by neurotypicals for other neurotypicals. And in most therapy training and counselor training, there is absolutely no or very, very little mention of any neurodiversity. So people get skilled in how to convey empathy with another neurotypical person, but not really how it works when they're not neurotypical. And so I started off my journey doing person-centered counseling, and I actually found that doing that taught me how to mask better, because I learned how to do conversations with neurotypical people better than I did before. And then I kind of learned about transaction analysis, and that was much more like, with transaction analysis, I kind of, the person who invented it wrote a book that's what do you say after you say hello? You're not neurotypical if you write a book like that, right? So much more incorporating some different ways of being, I think, in TA. But anyway, going back to your question, so for a very, very long time, there was this belief that if you're neurodivergent, then you're basically a neurotypical with a broken brain. And we just kind of need to fix what's broken, rather than this is a different operating system. You're on Android and I'm on a Mac or on an Apple device, and we need to find different ways to actually operate things across. How we communicate with each other, how we do empathy, like I was saying, like empathy is so different. So there's that. There's also historically been a real heavy focus on masking in therapy, and getting clients to mask and getting clients to comply, which we know doesn't work. Like, people can behave in a particular way in therapy and then walk out of it and go, I feel even worse now. This is supposed to help me. And I can see that you're nodding, so maybe this is resonating with you.
Yeah. I think to be your authentic self in therapy is essential. Right. Otherwise, you're not going to get to the bottom of issues. Masking is a terrible thing, and especially such an intimate moment when you're seeking help to some really big challenges. Wow. Now, this neuroaffirming supervision. So you've written a chapter on that for an upcoming book that's on autistic therapists. So
it's been written by autistic therapists. So everyone's written a different chapter in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell me about neuroaffirming supervision? Can you tell me more about that?
So neuroaffirming supervision, just like neuroaffirming therapy, is about making sure that you look at what does the person in front of you need? What are their sensory needs? What are their regulation needs? What are their communication differences? And not making assumptions around what you see, but actually being there with curiosity and actually inquiring. Is it that I'm really boring right now because I actually am boring myself? Or is it that is there something here that's actually not captivating enough? Is there something going on for the other person? And actually just inquiring about it without any judgment. So there's a lot about that. There was a lot of therapists that have said that they felt that they needed to perform in supervision. They needed to comply and mask, because they were so fearful that their supervisors were judging them because they were not doing therapy right, or they weren't behaving in the way that they were expected to be reflective on the moment, or on the spot. When actually we know there's processing differences. Sometimes people take a week to actually go, oh, I get it now. And it was seen as like, oh, this person's really resistant, or it's caused a lot of supervisees to just disengage with supervision. And supervision is supposed to be a space where we can be honest. We can be really honest and go, I am struggling so much right now, and this person is totally like my mother, or I feel like I'm 5 years old when this person says this and this, or that person's voice is just really grating on me, or whatever. But in order to be honest, just like you were saying in therapy, in order to be honest, we need to be able to feel safe. And it's really about that. It's about kind of challenging people in our profession to know better and therefore to do better, because if our therapists can be held appropriately, they're going to be able to go out there and do the work in a much better way.
That's fabulous. When you were talking about processing, I know my ADHD brain does take a while to process things, and at times I need to think and ponder and let my overthinking work for me and try and extract answers to the question, if you know what I mean. So I'm not particularly good at reactionary, on the
Mhm.
spot, kind of
Mhm.
processing. Yeah, especially for important questions. And in therapy, that's obviously that magic time to, yeah, to have a really good ponder and get the most out of that session for sure.
Absolutely. And I think also with therapy, sometimes it's so overwhelming. Like if you're being asked a question, and like with some of our ADHD processes, it's like, oh my God, I can see like 11 different angles to this.
Yes, yes.
Um, and because we have such a history of being gaslit or of being told that we're not paying attention when we should be paying attention, there's like so much fear also that kind of feeds into this. We're just kind of stuck. I was like, I don't know which one of the 11 things are actually relevant right now.
Yes.
And that kind of leads me on again to or kind of closing back to empathy. If we're looking at ADHD, particularly ADHD empathy, is just as attention driven as everything else is in our lives. So um, if your attention just isn't there for whatever reason, and that's not something that should be any judgment on, if the attention just isn't there, then the empathy can't be there either. If you're completely done and spent, there can't be any empathy, right?
Mm.
And if you're a person that just has so much somatic empathy, like if you're with somebody and you're just having all the feels, you're going to exhaust yourself much more, right? Um, and so in therapy, there should be space to learn to regulate some of this. It's almost like you can turn down the empathy dial. Um, and in theory, that sounds really lovely, and in practice, that might take a really long time. Like I think that's the other thing we often uh, like the 6 sessions and you get some work done is maybe something that you can do with a neurotypical person. With neurodivergent folk, you time. I mean, we have time blindness. Like time in itself is such a weird construct. So 6 sessions, what can you do? I mean, in what some ways you can do a lot, and in some ways you need so much more. And it really is okay.
And this is part of your training therapists to think this way and to look at it all and at that angle. I think it's marvelous. It's really shaking up the system, I think, which is brilliant. And there's more of it. There's more of us, we've always
Yes.
been there, but at least recognised now and diagnosed certainly helps us, yeah, process some challenges that we've had along the way, which leads me to some questions about approaches and techniques that you use for
Mm-hmm.
your neurodivergent clients. Now,
Mm-hmm.
can you tell me about brain spotting and other sort
Mm-hmm.
of cutting edge techniques that you use?
Yeah, of course I can. So, have you heard of EMDR?
No.
Okay. Uh, well, brain spotting was developed out of EMDR, but just as a side note, so what we do in brain spotting is we use a pointer and we find an eye position that actually correlates with either an emotional experience or with a calming experience in your body. And then we start to process whatever we're processing on from that point. So we might be finding it, is it here, or is it stronger here, or does it feel stronger over here? Um,
Wow.
and then what we've actually find is we can go into trauma from a calmer place. So we might go, okay, where in your body do you feel calm or grounded or neutral whilst you're still thinking of this? And I might go, okay, so I'm feeling really activated in my arms and my legs, and I just kind of feel like I want to run. But actually, if I'm thinking about a calm place, and even just looking for that calm place in itself is calming and grounding. Um, I'm noticing that actually my nose feels calm, or my earlobe feels calm, or my cheek, or whatever. And then we go, okay, just let's focus on that cheek and let's just hold that eye position. Like maybe this one was the right eye position. Let's just hold that eye position whilst you focus on that calm place. And it's absolutely fascinating. So I've had people who have said after one session of this, they've never felt safety in their body, and all of a sudden they can actually tune into safety by looking at a particular spot, and they're just absolutely amazed. So I'm a huge fan of brain spotting, which is why I'm a consultant, and I'm currently co-writing some training on helping other brain spotters, working with neurodivergent folks.
That's so fascinating. But how wonderful that the results are huge. That's wow. The things I didn't know. Thank you for filling me in on that. That's great.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Now you practice your neurodivergence affirming therapy. What does that look like in practice? And and I could put it another way: if someone was to use your services or what would it look like?
So at the moment, I only work online. So I meet them in a Zoom room. We chat for a bit just to kind of get to know each other a little. And we find out what they're struggling with, what they might want to work on. I might talk about some of the different tools that I've got available. Specifically around ADHD, I find that common topics that bring people to therapy are, for women, it often is that loss of a sense of self because they've been masking their entire lives. It might be that they're in complete burnout. It might be people sometimes come because they're struggling with work and feeling like they're really not being productive enough, and then they do like an hour's focused work, but can't actually get started. So there's a lot of motivational challenges that they might be experiencing. I work with couples, so there often is especially in the mixed neurotype couples, the understanding of how each of the people in the couple need to communicate, how they do communicate, what the communication is about, and how it's being received, so that people can actually step into each other's shoes again and start hearing each other again. Trauma is a big one as well, because neurodivergent folks have a much higher risk of being traumatized based on experiences in life, but also based on our nervous system. So we are much more prone to actually experiencing trauma. And rejection sensitivity is a big one. I'm thinking of specifically in relationships. Rejection sensitivity is the thing that people carry so much shame about as well. It's like a process that happens that often is probably a trauma response. I think Dodson said by the time a kid with ADHD is 10, he will have had like, was it 20,000 negative
20,000.
comments? That's just incredible. Like each one of those will have been felt in the body and will be held, and that shame spiral that kind of kicks in, and then there's that kind of that full force.
Actually, hearing that back from you in a big bundle, I'm thinking, gosh, we have been through a heck of a lot, haven't we? And you're so right with the loss of self. And trauma comes in different packages, doesn't it? It doesn't have to be grandiose by other people's means. If it's deeply personal, that's traumatic. You're right with relationships and self-doubt and the loops and the masking. It is a lot to carry. And
It is.
I celebrate myself for getting through my lifetime, to be honest. And I was
Mm,
only diagnosed 3 years ago myself.
mm,
Um, yeah, there was a lot of living and a whole bunch of lack of understanding about
mm.
why my brain did what it did and how my life resulted from that. So no, I can definitely see there's a lot to unpack. And there's that it's all interconnected, isn't it? It's not just
Mhm.
um you've lost yourself, we'll fix that. It's all bundled into quite a complex package for ADHD. And you're working across all neurodivergence too. So
Mm.
with dyspraxia and dyslexia and autism and that must be difficult too, because what might be a tool for an ADHD person isn't necessarily the tool for an autistic person.
Mm.
And you've got to try and make it work. Wow, you've got your work set out for you there, Romy. It's um
Oh,
it's very
well,
complex. I'm impressed. I'm impressed that you're very passionate about it and you're training
hmm.
therapists to do even greater work than they currently are. I think it's incredible.
I thank you for that. But if we look at ADHD, um, and the real common um, co-occurring conditions, we have dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, really common. I think there's a 50% chance that you have one of those if you're ADHD. Recent figures suggest that if you're ADHD, you have a 70% chance of also being autistic. And that's something that most clinicians are not getting their heads around. So we're currently using the DSM-5, so the book that clinicians use to
Yes.
diagnose somebody. In the DSM-4, it was still, you could not be both. You could only
Yes.
either be ADHD or autistic. And people started realizing, hang on a minute, we have these people with this really wonderful and interesting mix of actually the brain doing ADHD process and autistic processes. And sometimes it looks like this, and sometimes it looks like that. And when we give these people ADHD meds, all of a sudden the autism comes out because the ADHD is kind of taken care of. Um, but it means that people just need to know. People need to know if you're working with somebody with ADHD, you need to know all this other stuff so that you can
Mm.
support your people better. And you're absolutely right. Something that might work for one ADHD isn't going to work for somebody that's autistic, might also not work for another ADHD. So it is just about, let's get to know what might work for you. And sometimes we have to get it wrong in order to get it right. So first it's just data, it's just information on, all right, so that didn't work. Let's try this one out. It's the same with kind of when we're working on regulation strategies. I give people probably about 50 different regulation strategies that we kind of work through. And I always say, practice them between now and next time I see you. Not all 50, like they're staggered. But the idea is that you have a whole host of things and your body and your brain will be able to respond to some of them and not to others. And
Mm.
that's absolutely okay. And so your body can work out, this one can work for me. And if I get really dysregulated, I'm going to go and do this. And if that doesn't work, I've got 10 others that I can go to and maybe not have a meltdown. Or maybe I do have a meltdown, but I can recover much quicker afterwards.
Wow. Whew. Now, Romy, if I was going to say if any, but I think there may be. What changes would you like to see in the
Mm.
therapeutic field to serve the neurodivergent clients better? What more work is there to be done? Or do you think you're on the right track with your work? Is it evolving or
Oh, it is absolutely evolving because we're constantly finding out more.
mm,
Um, I think I think what I would love to see is that neurodivergence is something that's actually being accounted for right from the start, that it's not an add-on diploma that you're going to do. It's actually something that you learn properly, because you're learning how to be with people and how to support them when they're struggling. And at the moment, what we have is we have a lot of neurodivergent folks offering services for other neurodivergent folks. But what we really need is for people to recognize, okay, you can be neurotypical and offer the service, but you need to know all of this. And you need to know that actually for a neurotypical person, to work with maybe an ADHD, that might be harder for you. And that's okay. Like every time we work with somebody that comes from a different background to us, we have to work a little bit harder to understand them. And that's okay. Like we have to put in the work, not them. It's not on them to tell us. It's on us to do the learning. It's on us to do that. And for us to learn how we can make the space safe. So I'd love to see that. I'd love to see schools being really informed about this, that actually kids can get a positive understanding of who they are without having to hide those parts of themselves. A really good friend of mine said to me the other day, her little one he's only 6, and he said, I feel like a part of me has to die whenever I go to school. And I was just like, oh, that just stopped me in my tracks. It's like, that is just heartbreaking. One of my kids, she's 15 now, but she was 13 when she started asking me if she was ADHD. And she did some of these internet quizzes, and she was like, well, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. I'm like, okay, sadly in the UK, you kind of have to go through school, and then school because you need to have these symptoms in more than one environment. And school were just like, yeah, we're not seeing any of this. And I'm like, okay, but you've already got the things here. And the educational psychologist was in this meeting, and she said, yeah, it's just about how we actually assess. And if schools aren't seeing it, then girls are just not getting a diagnosis. And it's like, well, how about we start teaching schools what this looks like in girls? How about we start showing that the kid that's sitting really quietly and is actually pinching her legs so that she can pay attention and is not getting any kind of negative messages, is really struggling. But because she's not a pain to you, you're not seeing it. It's things like that.
That's really interesting. And I think those girls grow to be young women and diagnosed as adults. And school is tough. It should be heaps of fun and, the best days of your lives and all those things. But it is tough with ADHD, and we have learnt very early on to mask and to fit in. And that seems to be the done thing. I've written in my book, to be praised for my masked person is really, really tough, because it means I have to pretend and that meets approval. But when I'm myself, I don't seem to get that praise, if you know what I mean. Unmasked. Yeah, so you're almost pushed into this, well, masking is required. You must mask, and that conforms, and therefore that's when you get the big tick. You'll make friends that way. This is my thoughts, obviously, but yeah, I found it very tough and quite confusing at school. Yeah. The friends that were they really my friends? Were they really there when I needed them? Or it was tricky times. But it makes sense to me now why, of course. Lots of work to do in schools. And I think that's worldwide too. In New Zealand, there's a bit of work to do in the schools as well to try and identify those, particularly girls again, because, more introverted or covert in some of their traits, making it not so obvious.
And I hear that. And also, one of my other kids, this was still in primary school, like I started to see all the things because of COVID. So COVID meant homeschooling. It meant I got to see things where I was like, what's going on? Like, and I took her to have an assessment with an ADHD specialist counselor who wrote a report for school with all of the things that she was struggling with. So all of the things were in there. And the school still turned around and said, we do not see any of them. I took her to the ADHD Foundation where she had like a QB test, which is they strap like a reflective surface on the forehead, and they have a camera that then kind of checks how much movement there is and gives the kid something to play with, where they need to press a button every time an X shows up on the screen, but not if something else shows up on the screen. And that's how they check for movement, whether there's any kind of movement around, but also they check for the attention and the impulsivity. And then afterwards, they shared this report with me, and they said she's on the 98th centile for hyperactivity. There's no way school could not have seen that, especially with here's a report and here's everything that you need to look out for. Like it was spoon fed to them, and they still were like, we are not seeing this. It's like, I don't know what else needs to happen. And I understand all these things, which is why I've been pushing and I've been helping or trying to help teachers to see it. But there's been a lot of you're the parent, I think if nobody's ever actually said to me, you're just too anxious or whatever, but I can kind of see it on their faces, like, this is your problem. This kid is fine in school, until they're no longer fine in school. And then it's like, but I've been talking for years. And so there's so many other parents out there, and it often is women that end up being traumatized by schools, not listening, trying to do right by their kids, and often also having ADHD or some other neurodivergence themselves, and just feeling completely lost in the system. So these are some of the challenges. If I were president of the world, that's what I would do.
So what would that look like, Romy? Would every teacher ideally be trained on how to pick things up, or would you have a specialist in the school that would, sort of roam the classes and be of assistance? If you were president, how would it look like in schools? Yeah.
If I were president, what I would say, in this utopian life of mine, I think we do so many assessments with kids all the time on reading or arithmetics. Why wouldn't we do standard assessments to figure out what their strengths are, what are the things that they're inherently struggling with? And then why don't we just actually put things in place to support the kids that are struggling with certain things, and also to enhance the bits where they're really doing really well on? Because, I mean, the neurodivergent kids are the inventors, right? If you think of, was it Thomas Edison with the light bulb, and he got it wrong 2,000 times? Who has that kind of tenacity or hyper focus to be spending so much time and trying different ways of figuring it out? Like that's us, right?
Yes.
But allowing kids to actually do the things that they're naturally good at, rather than discouraging them from doing those things and paying attention in this format and having to sit down and keep your body still rather than running around, when that actually absolutely is what you need to do. Like, it's this mass approach that is so oppressive, because it's based on all the schooling stuff. It's based on neurotypical development. And we know that ADHD is, we know that their brain, their prefrontal cortex, take much longer to to mature than it does for neurotypical peers. There's so many things that we need to do differently.
Well, I say Romy for president.
Yay!
That actually really does sound almost like a simple solution, or a simple start at least. You're right with the assessment. Just like to see how you're going with maths, or how your spelling is. How you approach things. That would be really, really good to implement. I want to see amazing things happening in your side of the world.
I want to see amazing things happening everywhere for kids and grown-ups too, because, I mean, kids can only do well if their parents are well supported too.
Yes.
And, we need, as parents, we need to, if we're in jobs, we need to be able to be supported in a way that we're not completely burned out and then come home and can't function. And now it's time to put the kids in the bath. And it's like, oh my God, I can't string a sentence together anymore because I'm so spent at work. So there's so many things that I think it's a whole systems change that we need.
Yeah, that's awesome. Romy, I'll have all of your website details and the copy of the podcast. So if any of our listeners want to go in and check out more about your counselling, you're available online, which is brilliant. So that means you're available worldwide. And for listeners, we're sort of 11 hours different. Are we 11 or 13 hours? I can't work it out, but you're available, which is fabulous. Look, I have learnt so much during this chat. Thank you very much. It's very fascinating, great insight for me, and I love it. So, Romy, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. Before I leave, can I tell you something?
Please.
Your book is on the recommended reading for the course that I'm running.
Oh, wow.
So I am so pleased that you've written that book.
Oh, thank you so much.
I think it's really helpful for a whole lot of people to understand some of the challenges that you've experienced. And I do think we can, if more people were to pay attention to lived experience, we'd be in a much better position. So thank you for writing it. And I hope that this podcast goes.
That's brilliant. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I think also I just wanted to give a shout out to the other women in the book who shared their experiences. I felt if it was just my story, it wouldn't even touch the sides. I'm one of millions. But yeah, the women, I thought it was quite an interesting range of experiences, from highly successful, confident, to those that have trouble getting out of bed and making a coffee in the morning. And I really thought it was a kind of a warts and all story. This is what it looks like. And a lot of the stories there too, the women hadn't told their partners or their parents or their children. Very deeply personal. And yeah, I'm just so glad that they allowed me or trusted me to share it, because they made the book for me. They made it complete. But that's very kind and wonderful to hear. Thank you so, so much.